Great. Awesome. My talk today is called 5 Moves to Re-Polarize Your Marriage. Specifically, it's talking about actions we can take to restore maybe more masculine strength on your dynamic of the marriage, and also maybe spark more of a relational spark with your spouse, your wife. We live in a really confusing time as men in particular, and I think we've all felt this to some extent, where there are thousands of organizations and thought leaders who are purposefully kind of injecting disorientation into our own kind of narrative around masculinity, as well as our families. And I personally have felt a lot of confusion in this area, not of like, oh, am I a man or a woman, much more of a, but I think in terms of like, what does a healthy masculine role within a family look like? And I think Jeremy and I have been in, how many mid-rashes have we gone through this thing? And I can imagine you're chuckling a little bit about this, because I feel like I've flip-flopped all over this. There was one podcast that Jeremy and I did together, maybe it was probably right around when I started exploring this, maybe 4 years ago, where I literally came in very clear from a theological standpoint about biblical masculinity, and Jeremy just dismembered me on a podcast, and I left the podcast convinced I was wrong. And so it's kind of fun to have like a historical, yes, he literally just cut me down. So it was great. I like to think as we're out in the frontier, I'm imagining like Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, like walking in this room, 150 years ago and being like, you guys are literally talking about what is a daughter, what is a man, what is what's wrong with you people? Like, this is so bizarre historically that we have to even have a conversation about what does masculinity look like. This is a weird and new issue that we're having to deal with. And I'd say specifically in preparing for this talk and as I've explored it, the Bible is actually really a difficult source to talk about masculinity, because it's like the assumed ether surrounding the Bible. The Bible says very little about gravity. And it's like, does that mean the Bible's against gravity? It's like, no, it just assumes that there's gravity, right? And I'd say very similarly, the Bible kind of assumes that we all know what masculinity and femininity look like. And so there are kind of evidences and stories that allude to it, but it's actually difficult to start as the primary text because it's just kind of the subterfuge beneath all of it. So what I've done is I've kind of blended some from a scriptural standpoint, a bunch of midrashes, and then some from 2 kooky books. Has anybody read these books, The Way of the Superior Man or No More Mr. Nice Guy? Cool, okay, great, awesome. Now this will be new information for you. Great. I recommend these books with a giant asterisk, which is they're super weird in spots. I think both of these men are divorced and have kind of used their sort of plot of masculinity toward really self-fulfillment. There's no sense of sacrifice and no really understanding of a covenant in a marriage. And so that's why I recommend it with some hesitance. And that's really why I put together what started here was a document. I read a weekly newsletter, and in one of my paragraphs I said, hey, I found a lot of momentum in my family by leaning into the protective instinct that I have as a father. And like 20 people responded and said, tell me more about that. I was like, that's weird. Like, immediately people were like, I want to hear more. So I wrote up a little like 5-page document kind of summarizing my thoughts on it. And it's had several thousand views. I made it editable so people commented all over it, caused a lot of polarization within that document. I'm like, okay, there's something here that our society needs, which is to understand the masculine feminine polarity, specifically within a family. And I think that we're very confused on that. I'm going to jump into it. One last caveat is the scope of this talk really is to the family, in my opinion. I'm not saying it doesn't apply elsewhere, but I'd say the area that I feel like I've got certainty is within the family, and experiential learning is within the family. So what this means for male-female executives in your company, I don't really know what that means. I've had probably more C-suite women than men in my companies, and I am not applying this framework within that context at all. I don't know how to think about that at this time, but this specifically, I have certainty that it will result in more thriving in your household if you kind of walk down this path with me. So, all right, real quick context, I'm Blake. Hi, nice to meet you. Can everybody hear me okay? My voice goes about 1 foot and then drops, so I'm gonna try. I think I got this. I can bring more energy this way. I'm Blake Chandler. My wife and I have been married for 17 years. We have 7 kids, ages 14. Everett was just over here having breakfast, down to Ford, who's 5 months. It's 4 girls, 3 boys. And in Cincinnati alone, we have 3 grandparents, 15 aunts and uncles, and 10 and counting. I may get another nephew today. We're like on watch right now. And so my wife's the oldest of 10 kids, and most of her siblings have all moved to Cincinnati. So we've got a big, thriving thing happening, which is great. From a career standpoint, if we haven't talked, I mostly spend my time as a growth marketer. I have a growth marketing agency. I'm an EIR at a VC, and mostly that just looks like working with startups. I'm not really making investment decisions. We do some short-term and long-term real estate, and I wrote a book last summer called The Family Framework that's coming out next summer. If anybody's enjoyed any of my talks on like weekly and quarterly and annual meetings and like taking kind of entrepreneur frameworks and applying them to family, that's what that book's about, and I'll probably be pushing it next summer is my guess. But I've been exploring a lot of these different ideas, and I'd say this is an idea that is actually not coming from primarily a place of research. It's coming from a place of experience. So quick context on my background with masculinity. Here's me in 2004, peak masculinity, 2004. I wasn't like other boys. I was 6'1", 128 pounds. I was very much into aggressive inline rollerblading, and I heroically ground down a 10 stair at my local church. I very much liked Dashboard Confessional. I wore my girlfriend's American Eagle jeans. I very much wanted to protect her heart as I texted her on my Nokia. I was lead singer of my own band, worship band, and also had an acoustic side project, of course. I kind of generally rejected, I don't know if you guys experienced this, in the early 2000s, there was kind of like, what was cool, at least in my experience, was like kind of rejecting jock culture, kind of alpha culture, and there was this kind of alternative culture of kind of like pop punk, hanging out in the parking lot at night, drinking beers and skateboarding. Like, it was kind of like a weird underculture. And the last fist fight that I was in at this picture was in 3rd grade, which was ruled a draw by my mother, Beth Smith. These skills, I don't know if does anybody resonate with this thing of like the culture of masculinity in the early 2000s was maybe best embodied by like Jim Halpert, which is like, Jim Halpert was different than the other guys, right? If you look at like traditional masculinity, really is Dwight. Guy's building a multi-generational farm. The guy's like top salesman every single time. He knows how to defend himself. He keeps ninja stars underneath his desk. Like, Dwight actually represents traditional masculinity in some ways, and it's so lame. And then Michael is the one who's taking authority and is willing to put himself out as the leader, and it's so lame. And Jim snarkily kind of sits in the corner and just kind of like laughs at him the whole time. And that's kind of what was cool in the era in which I became a man. And I think many of us became men. And I think that was kind of the beginning of this sort of counter narrative of masculinity, which was not like, therefore, we're not questioning gender, but it was kind of the rejection of traditional masculine roles. And I would say all of these skills, none of this is helpful for fathering a family of 9, right? And so what I've found is over time, as we had more kids and our life has got more complex, the world is asking something of me that I didn't study for the test. And so I'm needing to cram the night before because I'm having to level up. And this was most crucial for me at my crisis point almost exactly, I guess 4.5 years ago. I think I brought it up to some of the men here when I was here 4 years ago. We had a mentally unstable family member. My father-in-law had a manic break and got to a point of being really dangerous. And so this is like stalking at random places, screaming at us in public places, showing up in the middle of the night, stealing cars, doing all sorts, like police involved, getting restraining orders, all this different stuff. And it kind of hit a point when I was working downstairs in my home office and I hear yelling upstairs, and my 7-year-old, Penny at the time, runs in and she's like, hey, Papa Bear's here, you need to come upstairs. And like, I was like, what is going on? I was on a call. I said, I'm out, hung up the call, run upstairs, and my 6'3" D1 football playing father-in-law was screaming at my mother-in-law in there in front of my 6 children at the time, and starts yelling at me, accusing me of vile things and stuff like that in front of my children. And I'm like, the last time I was in a fist fight was in 3rd grade. I have no weapons. We don't lock our doors. and I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. And all the people in my household look at me like, all right, what are you going to do about this? And I'm like, I did not study for the test. Like, I had no clue what to do. And so what I did was I ended up talking, just kind of trying to talk him down, ushered him outside, called the police. And that was my initial introduction into the role of protector as father. And I made what amounts to almost a vow, which is I will never be in that place again. And that happens 1% of the time. But what I found out that day is that 1% actually happens. And 1% can happen to you. And will you be ready in that spot? And that, I'd say it shed light on the Jim Halpert narrative in that moment of, shoot, I was not ready to do this. And so that kind of kicked me into this crash course on, okay, I think there's a God-ordained role of the masculine, of the father, that maybe I'm missing. And at the time, I was doing weekly, quarterly, annual meetings, setting vision. We had a mission, vision, values. I was missing something. There was something else that was actually far more base level that I was missing. All right, ready for the money slide? This is it. This is the money slide. Found this online, but this is a general framework for masculine over here on the left, feminine on the right. And I would say this may look complex. I actually want to talk through each of these points together. But if you're looking for a through line of what is the masculine role, what is the feminine role, you really have to go to two things: bone density and giving birth to children. These are two things that are fundamentally different about you and your wife. You have more bone density, and you have the capability of becoming much more strong through effort, right, than your wife does. Second, you are incapable of having children. Your wife is capable of having children. Most of the things when it comes to masculine and feminine really map in some way to those two things. And so let's talk through it. Number one, obviously for the masculine. So if you see here, we have maturity at the top. If you can't read it over here, this is the mature masculine at the top and immature at the bottom. And then we have masculine, then we have feminine. This, number one, obviously is protection. You are, in any animal kingdom, the male makes sense as the protector because we have the physical tools necessary to protect and that we can get bigger, right? Another would be direction. Why direction? A big reason for direction is because the vulnerable state in our natural state, our women will be pregnant half the time. And that means that they are going to need some level of direction. Someone needs to take over during that half the time. And so I think it again maps into like, oh, yes, the masculine should probably take that role because otherwise you're going to be changing leaders literally every other year. Stability. Hormonally, we have more stability available to us because our hormones are not in fluctuation. Clarity, which is the ability to bring clarity to your team, again, I think maps to the direction question. And then certainty, which I think maps, again, to kind of hormones. So this is the mature masculine can bring these things specifically to the family. And when you do this well, it frees up the feminine to go on the other side, which is really mapped around nurturing, which is intuition. This is really coming to a level of openness to the world. Rather than protection, you actually are now free to have a level of intuition, which is like, what could this thing be? Oh, this random man was walking down the street. We should maybe invite him in. Who knows what's in here, right? You know, like you have the ability to be open, right? Surrender, which is by state. You know, if you have a doe who is giving birth to a fawn, they are in a vulnerable state in the middle of a field. Like someone needs to protect. Someone has to be able to have surrender, right? Sensitivity, which I think maps directly to nurturing, and then openness. To be clear, all human beings have both masculine and feminine modalities ourselves, right? And as entrepreneurs, I think we often need to play in this area of intuition. We need to play in this area of sensitivity, whether it's to markets or anything else like that. Like we can play in all of this. However, within the family, you need some level of poles. We'll go to the immature masculine. I think we're all familiar with this. Violence, control, abuse of power, avoidance, arrogance. I think right now in our culture, because we associate masculinity as a whole with the immature masculine, I think that the encouragement has been to react and then go into a healthy feminine for men. And those are true things when we see the immature masculine. And then conversely, on the immature feminine, we have overwhelm, confusion, uncertainty, anxiety, and low self-worth. I've found that this is really helpful even in my own heart. Like if I start to bring something, it's like, okay, where am I? What am I bringing into my home? And really simple examples like certainty. I am super high on openness and like it was a Big 5, Big 4 personality tests. Myers-Briggs, I have a P. Like it's like I'm very much in that zone. And so I really love keeping my options open for our family of like, hey, what are we doing this Saturday? And I say, I don't know. Let's just find out. And my wife has said like, hey, that's not helpful for us to do that. But that openness is really useful in terms of like, I'm very open to new business opportunities, to new relationships. Like it actually makes me good at sales. However, when it comes to the home, we've got 7 children looking to say, what are we going to do? It would be great to just have some certainty for me to say, this is what's going to happen on Saturday, right? This is an area where I actually need to submit my personality to actually the role that's being asked of me. So let's talk about what this looks like in a healthy marriage is that we have the male in blue on the masculine side, which frees up the female in pink to be on the feminine side. What that means is the masculine can lead with clarity, strength, and presence. The feminine can respond with openness, feeling, and radiance. Each draws out the best in each other. There's grounded leadership, which invites her expression. There's vibrant receptivity, which fuels his purpose. And the relationship feels alive, safe, passionate, and deeply connected. There's an otherness about each other, and that pulling actually kind of creates a certain level of well-roundedness in a marriage. I do believe this is the ideal and actually is the norm up into the past 150 years or so. I'm going to pause for questions after the next slide. Here is when it goes wrong, I guess the next 2 slides. A couple ways it can go wrong. This one is the one that I resonated with the most, and I think that was kind of happening in my marriage in some ways, was that we were decreasing in polarity. And I think this is a natural thing that happens, especially with young children, is that the truth is that if a baby's crying in the middle of the night, I'm going to go nurture, right? The truth is if the 5-year-old is pissed off and yelling and I'm not at home, my wife is going to go and bring some masculine energy and direct, right? And so we end up, there's a certain level of interchangeability which is necessary, especially at the young stage. But what happens is that over time, our poles begin to creep closer to each other. And that's kind of characterized by emotional neutrality and maybe a sense of like partnership or roommates as opposed to like a spark of real polarity and romance, right? They become teammates or co-parents but not lovers. There's little pursuit or there's little creative tension. This actually can be very harmonious relationally, but there's not a lot of pull and push, right? Conversations can stay surface level. Conflict and intimacy lack real depth. Both can feel in some way unseen and undernourished over time. And that can happen kind of at the middle. That can also happen where both kind of embrace mother as the ideal. That can happen actually where both embrace masculine as the ideal. But either way, if you are close in proximity on those poles, there will be a lack of spark within your marriage. And in some ways, your family will become extremely narrow in its culture. The other way I've seen it go wrong is reverse polarity. This typically happens when the wife is more naturally gifted as a leader than maybe you are, and is maybe more accustomed to a masculine role outside the home. And so the husband is maybe okay in just saying like, you know what, actually, why don't we just switch spots? And so what happens is that she's pushed into leadership as he maybe drifts and avoids tension and stops initiating. She may prefer this role because she doesn't trust him to lead or resent it, but see it as better than poor leadership, right? So she's like, hey, if somebody's gonna lead, I guess I'll do it, right? And carrying the weight leaves her exhausted and resentful on some level, while he loses confidence, purpose, and respect, eventually leading to contempt from her towards him and shame for him for himself. I've spent a couple hundred hours this year with a really good friend where we're trying to reverse this process in his marriage. And this takes real work and repentance to kind of get through this. And so let me pause real fast. I just threw a lot of stuff. Any like questions, clarifying questions? Anybody just like, this is dumb? Yeah.
So actually, funny enough, I remember reading an article Jeremy wrote about why he doesn't believe in parenting. And it's a little bit of a clickbait, but he explains how in the Hebrew language, there's no word for parent. It's mother and father, and how our culture has sought to just morph those two into just androgynous parent one, parent two. How have you seen what are some of the things culturally speaking, even within the church or within Christian circles, that you see maybe some of the more masculine roles, even as the church has portrayed it, that might have gotten it wrong, that you're trying to now correct, as more a healthy dynamic to re-polarize it?
Yes, I would say that we generally have a war on certainty, right? Which is that when's the last time of we encouraged people to be certain, this is what we're called to, this is what we're doing. And I think that that's a general sort of feminization of the church toward just hey, openness, maybe this person is actually right. Let's get, I think there's a certain fear of certainty for sure. I think that, and then in terms of protection, I think that we almost always map protection to fear. We had a conversation with our local homeschool group. We meet in downtown Cincinnati, and one guy sends out a text to all the other fathers of the homeschool group and says, hey, this is in the middle of downtown Cincinnati. There have been shootings on the street. What is our plan for protection? Immediately someone pipes up and says, I think that response is coming from a lack of faith. The Lord will watch over us. And so he's like, I think that we don't need to be doing anything in this stance. We need to trust the Lord. And I immediately text out, keep going. I was like, this is the best. And then it went for 24 hours of just amazing theological debate of is this protective instinct okay? And so I think that there's definitely, each of these things, I think there's a spiritual argument against the masculine side. I've not seen the same thing happen on the feminine side.
Maybe one thing I'm curious what you think about this. I think the way I think about that issue of certainty is about courage.
Yes.
That's what I think you're describing, which is when you're not certain, I'm still going to lead, or I'm still going to move forward in faith. And that requires this masculine courage.
Yes.
Which, because in the face of potential uncertainty,
yes,
I'm going to
It's creating a sense of certainty for the people beneath you and saying, no, this is what we're doing. Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
Maybe you'll get into this, but is there I just think I would love to workshop this with my wife.
Yeah.
Is there even where are we polar on that spectrum? Do you have a set of questions that are about for husbands and wives?
Just send it the slides.
Yeah, I actually have, the document I put together actually maps out, I have 5 steps for us to take as men. I actually have one for women as well, and so I'll share out that document. Yeah.
When I think of my upbringing and stuff, the vast majority of the couples, it seemed like the woman was the spiritual leader. There was I'm just curious, do you see a trend happening? I'm now in a circle now where there's a lot more men leading, and I'm seeing better examples. But in my growing up, you're just there's passive men and women who are just kind of well, someone's got to do it, and they kind of lead. But I'm just curious, are you seeing? What are you seeing?
I think we're seeing, in talking with Jeff, forming men and some of this stuff, I feel like we're seeing a return of men into the church. And I would say we're seeing, I think there's just we've hit a point of stupidity in culture that I think a lot of people are saying, this is ridiculous, and we're kind of veering back, sometimes into the unhealthy masculine, but I do think that we're seeing kind of a resurgence of that in a way that we didn't see. I think there was always kind of yes, be a man, but now, don't X, Y, or Z, right? Yeah.
I think for me, and by the way, this is an amazing framework that you put together here for understanding it. I'm realizing that my family of origin, I was exposed to immature masculine, so which made me want to, and then just being really transparent, my mom essentially characterized or look down upon the immature masculine, so
yes.
which then actually idealizes some of the feminine,
yes,
openness and those kinds of things, which I'm just realizing my framework for understanding that coming out of family of origin is skewed, which makes
yes.
Makes it like a knee-jerk reaction one way or another, because I'm trying to avoid the pitfalls of the immature, but I didn't have a model for the mature. I don't know, does that make sense?
That completely, I feel like that was a perfect encapsulation of I think what most of us are coming out of. It's this this is bad, therefore go here. right? We weren't directed in this direction, right? Yeah.
Has this affected or informed your parenting of your sons and your daughters?
Yes. Yeah. I gave this talk to all my kids before I came here. And I was like, but I wanted them to know, like, hey, this is where it's coming from, and this is how, and I wanted to hear specifically my daughters. I separated them afterwards and said, what did you feel as we went in that? And like, some of it was new information to them. And yes, so I'd say very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to formulate this question, but like when you're talking about your friend that you're trying to help reverse marriage in this way, got a lot of people, a lot of young guys,
yes,
who are coming to me trying and like this is the problem, this
yes,
marriage, and like how's that going for you?
Yeah. Long, tedious work. Let's go into, like, I'll share some of, I can share some of what that's been, unless if you have one more and then I can.
Well, and you might get to this too, but like, in that scenario, is just the husband on board for this flip-flop, or is it essential for both to be on board for this
Yes.
reverse?
Great, that is my next point.
Segue.
Perfect, thank you. I'll pay you afterwards, yes. It only takes one person in a marriage to create polarity. If you think of magnets, it only takes one motion of one to create the polarity to actually push. And so a lot of the reason that these marriages are this way is because the man has abdicated the masculine pole. And so by him going further into that pole, it will actually create freedom for the woman to then back into this. But it's like, you have to understand, like if you die, to some extent your wife needs to fill the void. And so she's gonna have to embody some level of masculine energy that's gonna be necessary. In some ways, I think that we've allowed that energy to die. And so she's actually trying to cover both sides, which is why we see anxiety or burnout or a lot of these things, I think, in our wives. So the process is repolarization, and that process is walking towards the masculine on that side. And I actually don't think it is our primary job to change our wives in this area. I think it's our job to focus on ourselves and for us to work on this thing. And as that happens, I think that there's then freedom for the feminine to come alive. Did I say all those things? I think I said that, yeah. It kind of communicates to your wives that, hey, I've got this now, right? And another word for repolarization is repentance, right? We need to stop doing the thing, and we need to start doing the right thing. I question about saying this joke. I'm gonna say this joke. There's this guru, you're gonna make fun of me. There's this guru, lives like up on a mountain, and this guy says like, hey, I wanna go and find the way to enlightenment. So he climbs the mountain, comes to the guru, and he says, hey, I'm trying to find the path to enlightenment. You know, what am I supposed to do? He says, well, have you gone into the ocean in the morning and watched the sunrise? He goes, yes. It's like, have you held serpents without fear? He's like, yes. Have you hiked this, and seen this waterfall at nighttime? He's like, yes, I've done that. It's like, okay. He's like, have you swum in shark-infested waters? Have you done it? He's like, yes, I've done all those things. He goes, I know your problem. You need to quit doing all that stupid stuff. And that's what we need to do. It's like we need to stop doing stupid stuff and start doing the right stuff. And so I came up with a list of 10 things that in the past 4 years, when it kind of started my journey, 10 things that have actually changed in the way I've approached my family, the way I've approached my marriage. And I took those 10 things and I put them in front of Chandler, my wife, and we narrowed it down to 5. So this is my 5 things, because half of them I was just trying to fill at the end of the day. So, all right. 5 ways to repolarize your marriage. Number 1, very practically, at night, your doors need to be locked in your home, and that is your job. It is your job to scan for threats, physically, spiritually, emotionally. It is your job to look for where is the danger for my family. That is primarily your job. I grew up in suburban America, like so suburban, every house, there were only 3 designs of house in this neighborhood of 500 houses. There was no danger, we did not lock our doors, and there was never really any threat. So I came into a marriage, married a woman from Chicago, and came into our marriage, and I remember one of the first nights, she's locking the doors. I'm like, oh, you lock the doors? She's like, yeah, you don't lock your doors? What are you doing? And so that was the dynamic in our marriage for 12 years. And as soon as this incident happened, suddenly I was like, I'm going to make sure the doors are locked. And so like she just noticed one night that I scanned the whole house and I locked every door and made all the windows locked. And she came to me and started to cry. And she goes, I didn't realize how much that mattered to me. And she's like, I was carrying this weight every night when we went to bed and I didn't know it. She's like, literally, if you'd asked me if that bothered me, I would have said no. But now that you're doing that, she's like, I feel so relieved.
What do you do when you go to town?
I hope that she locks the doors. Yeah. No, but we have a security system, right? And so and I installed security cameras at every point, right? And I feel like we've gone pretty deep into like, okay, what are the most vulnerable points? How do we do these things? What signage do we put out in front of our house? We have multiple firearms. We learned how to use those firearms. And I just kind of said like, cool, my job is like chief protection officer of this home. And so physical protection is just a no-brainer. Like this is my job, right? But also it goes into other areas of protection. When we drop our kids off at Sunday school, it is my job to find out the names of the Sunday school teachers. And I always just say, what's your name? And I say, cool, this is my son, Truman. He's 8. I'm his father. I'm Blake. It's great to meet you. I love him very much, and I'm so thankful that you'd be watching over him. Statistically, that eliminates almost entirely the risk of sexual assault for a child. Is because if they see that they are attached to an adult man who has interest, like the risk does not, the benefit doesn't weigh out the cost, right? And so that's a very simple thing. Yeah.
So when you're going through this process, right, you're kind of taking ownership of these types of threats. What was the dynamic like with your wife in terms of guarding her heart and not letting her? So I'm thinking about my wife, right? If I started talking about, are these the vulnerable parts of our house,
Yeah.
like locking that down, she might get a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That might cause a little bit of anxiety a little bit.
Sure.
So how did you?
I started by asking her. I said, hey, where do you feel like there's danger? And she had a list. And I wonder if our wives actually all, because they are more vulnerable. By instinct, they're more vulnerable. So they, I think, are much more sensitive to the vulnerabilities that surround us. And so for her, it was like, we have a road. I worry about cars coming off and hitting our house. We have like water. We had an above ground swimming pool that didn't have a good gate. She had the list ready. And I was like, cool, that's my checklist. And I just worked down the checklist of things that she saw. This also started I started getting into jiu-jitsu. Literally the day after that incident with my father-in-law, I went to the 6 a.m. morning class for jiu-jitsu, and I haven't skipped on purpose in 4 years. And I go 4 times a week, and it has changed, it's such a cliche to say, it's changed my life. It has been a huge help for me. Both physically, it's been awesome. I love it. And now it's just a stupid hobby. It's way beyond self-defense at this point, and now it's just a nerdy thing. But I think it taught me some dynamics around resistance and around what it looks like to have a one-to-one adversary and what it looks like to persist through that. And I feel like there are a lot of different elements that I think some sort of self-defense is actually very useful. And I think jiu-jitsu is great because you don't have to do any striking, so you can not get concussions, and you can do it into your old age. Yeah, for me, that was actually pretty core to this for me, and then getting my boys into it as well.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
I would say one hack that helped us is this one. Before we moved from Maui last year, just the same thing. Crisis kind of brings up things. Meth house across the street starts getting really weird. People are wandering on our property, drugged up, all that stuff, right? And so you got to go through all the things: weapons, fencing, all that stuff. The one that really radically changed us is we got a beast of a dog.
Yeah.
It was a Great Pyrenees, which is literally if you look at 150 pound. They kill wolves.
Yeah.
Right? But they're the most gentle, loving, tender teddy bear. To kids. It's so there's certain breeds that are perfect for this.
Yes.
And and it was mainly to Colin's question because I just traveled too much and I was like, I cannot.
Yes.
Because speak at a men's retreat, being is a random dude going to wander on the property.
Oh my gosh.
Right, with on acreage near no civilization.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so the dog just instantly, crazy amount of safety.
Yes.
Crazy amount. He slept outside, patrolled the property
They're nocturnal. They just
wild.
Yep.
German Shepherd's another good one. We only had him for a year before we moved, but it was, and we left him because it wasn't going to work. The barking's tough on Pyrenees. Great Pyrenees.
Earplugs.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
So just bark outside.
Yeah.
But I would say the dog leveled us up pretty significantly.
Yeah. Yep. Another big part is investing in getting bigger physically. I honestly.
You do look jacked, bro.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see you.
Again, my context is I was 128 pounds, 6'1", Right. This is not, I don't enjoy lifting weights. That was not, I am not like, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I am not the picture of masculine strength. I don't go hunting. I don't go fishing. Like, it's like, but getting bigger physically has changed the polarity in our family. And I do think that there's something real there at some instinctual level that actually really does matter. Yeah.
So to that point, like you mentioned Davy Crockett, and there's obviously a big buzz with like red lights, sun in your balls, whatever.
Yeah.
What?
Which we all did this morning. Yeah. Yeah.
I got some soda alcohol.
As you did research, like what effect do you think outside factors play in hormones, just the masculinity side of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think is not?
As far as like optimizing that type of stuff, like I take creatine. Yeah.
Plastics and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
clothing, stuff like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's a factor. I haven't researched it.
Jump on TRT.
Yeah, I'm not taking any TRT. There are a bunch of dudes in my gym that do, and it's like an arms race, and like I'm trying to keep up with them, but like, man, it's scary. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Separate question. You alluded to this briefly, but can you talk a little bit more about protecting children from sexual abuse?
Yes. Yeah, this is part of my family of origin story, and so it's like something that when that came out later, and so when we found that out, I freaked out. And I got paranoid to a point where like I wasn't okay with my son going in the Chick-fil-A play place because if he went down the tunnel, I was like, what if somebody was hiding in the tunnel? Like I got really freaked out. And so my solution for that was statistics. And I just literally went through the statistics of like, what are the ways to, if I approach this as like a chief risk officer at, Kroger, the grocery store has a chief risk officer. How do I mitigate this risk to a tolerable level of risk? And there are a couple behaviors that you can do. The primary one is being really clear, like integration, connecting yourself to your child and making sure that everybody knows that that connection is strong and is there. Another is that it generally happens in the middle of the day and it happens with a family member or neighbor. And so it's like, okay, cool, I know that now. What's our pattern look like in the week? Who are the people in our home? Like, are we watching for these different types of things? Like, and sometimes it's like weird or awkward conversations. I remember when the Bigelows came and stayed with us. My brother-in-law was living with us. He was 18, and he was living in our basement. We're like, hey, yeah, you Bigelows, you guys can stay with us in the basement. And you're like, is your brother-in-law there? And I go, yes. He goes, we won't be staying in the basement. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's like, he was really clear. It's like, I set a boundary. He's like, well, that's not going to happen. And I feel like that, like, being vigilant of these things and kind of having some level of research, for me, pushed it out of the fear center into my prefrontal cortex where I can say, okay, if I do these things, now we're talking about risk of lightning strikes. I'm like, okay, I mean, there's a million risks at that level. I think
the other big statistical lever is like overnight camp.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like there's a few camps that are good. Like Connor took it really serious due to abuse, Pine Cove in Texas, but like because churches and faith communities are places of trust, that's typically where predators go.
Yes.
So I think kind of what Blake's talking about is a really important one, but then also kind of anywhere there's a kind of a culture of trust, there have to be good systems in place that can keep predators
Yeah.
kind of at bay as well. So.
Yeah.
And then also we have body safety rules, and we put them on
Yeah.
every door in our house. And every single babysitter we've ever had, we have that conversation.
Yeah.
And it is kind of awkward.
Yeah.
But, I mean, talking about statistics, I mean, if you're having that conversation with a babysitter, they're like, yeah, there's no way. I mean, you're like, we're having those conversations with our kids.
Yeah.
So that would be very high risk.
Yeah.
And then my sister is newly married. In Breckenridge, we just had different cabins. We were like, we're not going to stay under the same roof. We don't really know this guy. And then I will eventually have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Again, that is the job, right? And again, that's the Michael Scott job, which is to be weird, to put yourself out there and be like, hey, this is where I want things to go. This is how I want things to happen. Like, yeah. Last point is like, if your wife has anxiety, there can be chemical things at play. I still would make it your problem and say, cool, I want to tick down to make sure that there are no real threats that my wife is sensitive to that I'm not sensitive to. And I'm going to first address that before even diving into the chemical elements and that sort of stuff. Sometimes I think that that's actually a logical response. Anxiety is a logical response to an unprotected person. Yeah.
One of the unhealthy or immature masculine traits was control.
Yeah.
How do you balance this move one with the immature masculine trait of control?
Yeah. I mean, it's the shadow side, right? So it's a onesie. And so we have to always, I think that's in some ways the feminine needs to pull us back and needs to say, hold on, hey, they need to be allowed to go and hike over that hill, right? We don't know what's on the other side, but they need that, right? And so it's actually okay to have some tension in that. So I think we need our wives. And that's what's so cool, is that we have somebody watching our parenting or fatherhood 24/7, and they can, if you ask, they have some feedback for you. Yeah, at least mine does, yeah. All right, let's jump into another. That was just number one, and I want to honor time. Number two, this is kind of a very simple one, which is that we need to get comfortable with proposing things to our wife and not expecting her to propose things to us. So for instance, my wife is stressed out, obviously, at the table. It's been a long day. There are a lot of children screaming over each other. And we've wrapped up dinner, and I'm like, I can tell she's at like a 9 out of 10. I could say, hey, do you need to get some space? Or I could say, hey, what would make a good night for you? Or I could say, Chandler, I would like you to leave the house and go down to the beach. I want you to go for a walk for 20 minutes while we clean the kitchen. Thank you. Right? And she can say, no, I'm good. It's okay. I think the masculine can present, and the feminine can say, no, try again. And I like to think of that kind of being the dynamic at play, which is that, cool, then I can present something else. And so it's like, be okay being the presenter of options and proposing. So for a date night, for instance, I think the way to win date night is to say, this is the plan for the evening, and for it to be exactly what she had hoped for. It's not to ask her, what do you want to do for the evening? It's like, no, this is what we're going to do, and for it to match her because you know her, you study her, you understand her. So that's after dinner dishes, date night, Mother's Day, plan for the evening, whatever the thing is, get comfortable that I'm going to be the one who proposes, and guess what? Don't expect her to propose breaks for you. Don't be like, oh, it's Father's Day, I just wish that she would say, go off and go and do your own thing. Make your own Father's Day plan. It's okay, right? That it's all right for us in our masculine to say, no, I have a direction, I have clarity, I have certainty of what I want to do. This is what I want to have happen, and propose that, right? And so it's this weird kind of imbalance where it's like you kind of have to care for your needs in an imbalanced way versus you're also caring for her needs proactively. And I've found that the more I've walked into this dynamic, this specifically came from some of those books, it's really improved the dynamic. Because what was happening, I think, was some level of like, if I did it for my wife, I expected her to do that for me. And that creates some level of bitterness and just kind of little tiny violin playing of poor me, that sort of thing. Does anybody resonate with this thing? Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, any questions on that?
Maybe just, I think this is where what you're describing, men can't give into self-pity.
Yeah.
It'll destroy your family.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you want to say anything about it. Overcoming that, I think, is what you're describing is like, that you have to understand, part of this is expectation setting. And I think a lot of self-pity comes from having almost feminine expectations for our lives.
Yes.
And so, I don't know, yeah.
What's that little phrase they say, like, either take action to, either it's changeable and you should take action to change it, or it's unchangeable and there's no reason to be upset about it, right? There's something like that, whatever that phrase, yeah, I feel like that's the dynamic, which is just kind of rejecting any category of like, oh, I'm the primary actor in my life, and I should not expect my wife to be the primary actor for me, right? And some of this I think is like embracing, for me it's been interlocked with fatherhood, which is that I don't expect my children to do that. This is my team. They belong to me, and so this is where I do this. And I would say, I don't even think I talk about it in here. So I will say, there are times that we have the self-pity chaos, right? And I think that's what I would put that in, is in the category of chaos, right? Which is that we feel overwhelmed, confusion, uncertainty, anxiety, and low self-worth. We all feel that as men. Where should we take that, right? First to the Lord. Guess what? He's a father. That's cool. He has a masculine frame for those things. But sometimes we actually need another masculine frame. Do not ask your wife to be a masculine frame for your feminine chaos. What you need is you need brothers. And when you have brothers, they will be like, they can provide protection, direction, stability, clarity, and certainty for you. And so it's like, we actually all have feminine chaos within us. We have self-doubt and those things. Don't bring that into your home. Bring that to your brothers, and they can provide that frame. Because what chaos needs is a frame, and that is fundamentally a masculine thing. So don't ask your wife to do that. I think I do say that later.
I think that's, as a frame, makes sense, but I don't know what it is about that I'm disagreeing with in my spirit, but there's a part of me that's like the beauty of the intermingled, trusting relationship.
Yes.
There's some nuance in that it's like.
Yes, it has to do with like the monkey on your back concept, which is like, it's very important, I think, to be transparent with your wife and to be authentic with your wife and say, hey, I want you to know I am struggling with this right now. I'm struggling with some self-doubt, but I don't want you to feel like you have to solve this for me, right? I'd love to have your input on here, but this is not your problem. And I think it's like keeping the monkey on your own back and not putting the monkey on her back. Because I do think if we John Wayne-ize it and just be like, cool, I'm always good and you're not, like that's a little weird. Yeah.
And then the other thing on this, because that really resonates with me, because I find myself typically trying to be helpful, creating something good for my wife, who just happens to be sitting 100 feet from me.
Yeah.
But we talk about this all the time, so we're good. But that idea of like leading with proposal or
yes.
like guidance, but how do you think through either the categories or the types of decisions that you try to lead with proposals on versus just like openness to her input on?
Yes.
You know, like
yeah.
leading versus openness in general on like, hey, I actually.
What do we think about this?
Yeah.
Yes. I like that Jeff Bezos thing of really simple things that don't have a massive implication on the future. You should just make those decisions. What are the toppings for pizza? Just order the toppings for pizza. You don't need to gather consensus from the whole room, right? If it is a medium, this could actually impact the future of this group. What I should do is I should write a document that says, hey, here are my initial thoughts. I'd like you to review it and I'd like to have your input on that. And then if it is a fundamental, direction-altering, once-in-a-lifetime type of decision, you actually shouldn't write the document first. You should start with say, hey, here's the situation. How do we want to approach this? Because it has to do with buy-in, which is that if you need buy-in, you actually need co-creation of the plan. And so, but I think most of the family dynamic stuff is in category 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think part of this has to do, and I'm regret with this, is we are honest with our wives, that we share what's going on. But I think it's not wise to just say, I'm so afraid we're going to end up with nothing. Yeah. Vocalizing those lines.
Yes.
Because you need a brother to help you when you feel a little crazy.
Yes.
Right? Where you're really, where the enemy's coming and you're lost. Yes, of course we share stuff with our wives, but we don't share that bleak, catastrophized.
Yes.
Because then they're thinking, what's happening? Why?
Yes.
I didn't know this.
Because there are only two options. Either she descends into chaos with you, or she becomes the masculine frame.
That's right. And I think this is why we need openness with this woman.
Yes.
But we also need the strength of brothers
Yes.
to say, look, I know you for 5 years, you're crazy, stop it.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, yeah, that's right. But that's how I see,
yes.
That's how I see men dealing with this and needing one another in this ways.
Right. One thing I just learned recently is that if I'm not stating it, she still feels it.
Mm-hmm.
Like her intuition is really strong.
Yeah.
And so she knows when I have low self-esteem or something like that. It actually is a way for me to lead by me acknowledging it, because it takes the burden off of her worrying about it. If she knows that I understand and I'm doing something about it. But I'm still learning how to do that, but it's good. We got a light bulb.
That's good.
Another example of this that I've seen is like with lust. It's not helpful to say, I'm really attracted to this other friend. I have to share it. I have to get it into the light, so I need to take that to a trusted man. It's not helpful to take that to my wife.
Yes.
And I used to think like I have to share everything with her, and it's just really not helpful.
No. Good.
But one other thing with your table of 4 quadrants, you're talking primarily in terms of the polarity, left and right, male, woman, but the vertical one is also the different dynamic of boy and man.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not that we're moving toward the feminine, we're stuck in a childish frame of mind.
Yes.
And that's not because it's feminine, it's because it's immature.
Yes.
So I think also calling out the man doesn't mean only, don't be feminine. It means grow up.
Yeah.
My friend was doing a business in Colombia, business as missions, but it was just so hard, and the crime and everything. And one day he's walking home and says, God, if it wasn't for my family, I wish you'd just kill me. And he goes home and unburdens to his wife and everything. And she says, well, Jim, you're a big boy, and big boys do hard things. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One thing I was going to mention about the proposed thing is I don't know if you guys, one thing I think to put in perspective maybe on your wife is when you are hosting people over and you're having a meal and people are like, what should I bring?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know, you want me to make a decision for you? And I think it's the same concept for our wives. It's like,
yes.
What do you need? And the overwhelming piece of that is like, now I see you,
yes.
I propose what this is,
yes.
what this solution could be. I think that's just this really good,
yes.
I think she feels seen.
Yes.
Which helps us in that leadership piece.
Masculine hosting is really interesting. It should be, I believe, a little bit directive. It's like, come inside, sit down, drink this. Right? Like, that's actually important to like,
That's exactly how I say it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Drink this, sit down. Why are we standing right now? We should be sitting, right? Like, it's like, but somebody, have you ever sat in the awkward entryway and be like, I wish somebody would invite me in? That's a lack of masculinity. Like, someone needs to say, I'm owning the situation. This situation would be better on the couch, right? Like,
that's super interesting because I feel like that gets conflated with actually the women's hosting skills sometimes, but rather than the...
But again, it's like you create the frame and then she fills the frame with life. Yes. Yes. Yeah, right, right. That's good. Yes. I'm going to pick up the pace because I don't even know how much time I have, but I think I'm over. All right. This one was fascinating to me, maybe slightly controversial, but fascinating to me. Treat her words as a true description of the current moment in which you're sitting. This picture right here, this is my backyard this year. We live on the Ohio River, and we're like 60 feet up from the river, but we had a once-in-a-century flood this year where the water came up within 15 feet of our house, blocked off the road in one direction, and there was a landslide in the other, so we were stuck at our house with a 2-week-old baby and weren't able to leave for 5 days. And this is our dream home. We love where we live. It's integrated in with like the way we live our life is tied in with our home, and we set this out. We said this is our forever home. On this day, when I took this picture, my wife said, I don't want to live here. Like, this is horrible. I don't want to live here. And she's like, I came in and she was looking at houses on Zillow. I'm like, this is literally once in a century. The last time this happened was 1937. Realistically, this is not going to happen all the time for us. That's not what I said. What I said was, I would love to look at houses on Zillow. And we sat down and we looked at houses on Zillow and spent the evening just looking at houses and talking about what we liked and what we didn't like. And it was actually super enjoyable. What she was saying is, I don't like this situation. And I'm like, yeah, this situation sucks. We're stuck, right? 2 weeks later, water's down. We have a sand beach. We're walking on the beach. All our kids are playing. And she goes, I love our home. I did not bring up these words from 2 weeks before because I think, again, it's like in terms of what masculinity brings a certain level, is meant to bring a certain level of certainty, which is that if a man says something to you, you should take his words literally and hold him to them. The feminine actually needs to bring sensitivity, which is this is what is happening here and now, and we should take that literally, which is that's what's happening today, right now, but not necessarily hold her to her words 2 weeks later or 4 weeks later. And so I've found that this diffuses a lot of arguments, because I think often we want to hold our wives to some level of like, but you said this 3 weeks ago, and therefore, like, we kind of try to gotcha them a little bit. Or we can be wusses and be like, well, I was feeling that then, but I don't feel that now. And it's like, no, we should hold our brothers to being men of our words, and we should listen to our wives as to like, what is this communicating right now? What's going on in this dynamic that I'm not sensitive to, and how can I address this dynamic right here and right now? Any questions on that? Yeah.
So, what's the balance on that between validating the sensitivity I think I make the mistake a lot of times where, you know, I'll say to Mika, hey, your present moment is not your forever future.
Yes.
Or it's kind of like, hey, what you're feeling right now does not mean that like this is always our context.
Yes.
And so like, how do you balance kind of those two tensions?
It's like validating
Yes.
without invalidating.
Yeah. I don't know if there's an answer to that question. I think it's tension, right? That is a tension, which is that both things are necessary. We do need to be sensitive to the here and now, and we need to have, and I think that's healthy, that there is tension in that. But I don't know.
This is one of the reasons I think why what's happening now is so difficult. Because if she has equal authority, she could sell your home. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Like this works if she knows you're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Like this allows for that polarity to happen. You can absorb a lot of her chaos, she can have a lot of emotional reactions
yes.
without it threatening the family. As long as the man it's understood the authority he has in the home, it gives her that freedom. But if that is compromised in some way, where she's actually feels like the co-CEO, it could be a problem because she could make authoritative decisions for the family in a state like that, and then now we have a real fight in her hands.
There's something interesting too, and maybe this is just a totally separate conversation, but when I think about the daughter's conversation, like even scripturally, it's in the Torah where the father is held to complete account for what his daughter
yes.
vows to, right?
Yes. If he knows about it,
right.
Or invalidates within 24 hours,
right.
yes.
But nonetheless,
yeah.
there is weight to a woman's words,
yes.
and realities that is different and all those things. But so training up my daughters, like in our home, we talk about like barbers keep their word, right? Like, and right now that's not barber men keep their word.
Yeah.
That barbers keep their word, right? That is a huge core value of ours. So I don't know. I'm like.
I don't think we should treat it as it isn't important to be honest. It isn't important. Like those are actually character level things that I think are actually important on all areas. But I think in specifically entering into chaos, maybe don't allowing for a certain level of chaos and saying, I'm not going, even bringing perspective in your own frame when entering into chaos of like, I heard what she said, and I could forecast that literally into the future and be demolished. But instead, I'm going to interpret that as what is she feeling right now, and how can I enter into that with her now?
Well, one of the things you mentioned, like that I think is really important is there's actually a good reason why women do that, and that is because they're more sensitive.
Yes.
Like you want your wife to
yes.
freak out more. Like that's actually a good thing.
Because you don't freak out enough. You're leaving your doors unlocked.
Exactly.
Yes.
It creates the right balance.
Yes.
So it's like I think that if you have a masculine frame that masculine is good and feminine is bad, that's what creates a lot of problems.
Yes.
Like you have to embrace this reality. And like I said, as long as the roles are clear, it works. As soon as the roles get confused, this breaks down very badly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's so important to like first start with that.
Yeah.
What are our different roles? So that your heightened sensitivity becomes a value to the entire family.
Yes.
And I can absorb that. And it's okay for that to happen. And the same thing is going to happen to your daughters. They're going to be more highly sensitive. That's okay. Like as long as the men in the family are holding down like the reality, then it allows that hypersensitivity to actually serve the family.
Yes.
It feels like this is just giving honor to the wife as the weaker vessel, like a way of honoring.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's just some reality, which is that these are different, but yes, weaker, but also like a superpower.
Well,
yes, right.
Weaker is the scripture, the KJV term.
Yes, yeah, that's good.
The way I put it is like I feel like she needs the room to be able to explore the idea of what she's feeling to get to a healthy conclusion. But it's really easy to force it as if we're actually talking about making decisions, like should we buy a new house? Like the question I have on that is like there are a lot of like visionary entrepreneurial people in the room where we have to explore ideas and that's how we get there. Any tips on how in finding, because the other issue buffering the other side is that if you don't, if she doesn't join you in the process at some point, and then she won't have any ownership in the idea, and especially some ideas are more impacting than others. And so any tips on finding the happy place between not processing, you start to sense the current of the Holy Spirit moving some direction early, but because you need to explore that idea. But if you explore it with her, she's thinking, are we moving? Are we making
Yes.
a decision? Are we going to the mission field? Are we whatever? Like, how do you find
I think
a place where you start to
I think that is highly applicable. I've done this where I've convinced my wife that we're moving like 4 different times, and each time she's like gone on blogs and been like, "Oh, how do you live in Manhattan with 4 children, 5 and under, or whatever?" Like, and like, I'm like, no, I was just like feeling out an idea, and so it got to a point where she just said, "Tell me when it's time to pack." And she's like, and essentially she kind of told me, I'm not going to take your words literally until you're actually saying it's time to start moving on this thing. I don't think that was a great response. I think that was her coping with my visionary inclination to just like talk out loud. Now what I'm trying to do is label the conversation. And so it's like, if this conversation is happening during IDS in our weekly meeting where we're like saying, we have a problem, we need to find a solution right now, that's a very different conversation than we're on date night, we're on a walk, and I'll just say, hey, can I just like float some ideas around here? I don't want us to take any action on this, but I need a thought partner in this. And if she has that label on it, I think that she can actually enter in and do that really well. She actually has a masculine modality, and she's actually a better critical thinker than I am. And so I need that from her. And so it's okay for us to play with these things as long as we're labeling what's happening, I think. Yeah.
My wife, we do that, and then I think wisdom on her part, she says, you know, as opposed to shooting my ideas down, she goes, I just let Walt go.
Yeah, let him cook.
I encourage the combo, and if he continues talking about it 3 months later, I go, hang on, we might really need to shut this down or talk about it further.
Yeah.
And so she just, it frees me up to just go, and she's like, that's a great idea.
Yep.
Like, tell me more, you know, just kind of goes.
Yes, yeah.
Like when you take your dog on a walk, you know, you can let out.
Give him a little leash, yeah. All right, let's talk about this. This is a dynamic. Let's talk about sexuality a little bit. Assuming that your wife is the most adventurous woman on earth this is, I would say, a game changer in terms of your framework, in terms of intimacy. This is a quote from this guy, Corey Allen. These are the 3 rules to great sex, according to Corey Allen. 1, approach your wife as if she is the most adventurous, passionate, and open-minded woman in the world. When you assume less than this, you limit the possibilities of excitement in the relationship. Rule 2, it's her job to say no to anything she's not interested in, trying, or doing. It's your job to speak up and express your desires. And then 3, don't take things personally. If she says no to sex on the roof tonight, don't take it personally. Then refer back to rule number 1. Maybe I'm the only one, but I'm going to guess that I'm not, which is that at some point you have proposed some type of intimacy or some timing of intimacy or something, and your wife has said, no. In that moment, I think the temptation is to go to the kind of self-pity and be like, oh, I'm never going to propose anything again. That is digging your hole deeper, which is like there's nothing less polarizing and interesting to a woman than a guy who complains about his lack of sex or whines and asks or is like kind of in this kind of mopey sort of I wish that things were better, right? The ideal is to be like, that's all right, cool, I'll try again tomorrow night, and then like move on, right? What I've found is the more playful I've been in this process, the more enjoyable it has been for both of us. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm pretty much, this article, have you heard about this green light system? I think it's done for people who have like sexual trauma or something like that, where essentially the question of proposing sex is a difficult, especially if there's been trauma in the past. So there's a system where you have a light bulb on each nightstand of a bed. And what happens is that you can turn your light bulb on, or turn your switch on, and if the other person turns their switch on without you talking about it, then the lights come on and then you know that you have permission. Otherwise, you just have your switch on. And so that was the thing. I found that article, I sent it to my wife, and I just said, just so you know, the switch is always on. Like, it's always on, 24/7, and I want you to know that. But I think that, I would say there are a couple things here that I'll put as caveats within this context. One is we need to be realistic about the dynamics of our wife's both cycle and also macro cycle with pregnancy and the change in hormones, and we need to be sensitive to that thing and be realistic and compassionate right? And so I think that there's a version of this which is actually really gross, which is just like, I'm going to constantly demand to get my needs met, and if not, then I'm going to keep demanding. That would be really weird. I think we have to actually be realistic of like, oh, do you want your wife to enjoy intimacy with you, right? So that's one. Two, if you have bizarre or previous exposure to sexual stuff, whether in person or on porn and that sort of stuff, and you're bringing those expectations into this, I would say that's like a watch out, and you need to ask like, okay, is this idea, is this expectation coming from what's here and now, or coming from something else, and like, do I need to repent of that? That was number two. Were there any other things on that? Yeah, but in general, I've found this dynamic has been really great, and to even reassure my wife, like if she is like, I don't know if I'm like, stop right there, no worries, I love you, you're great, and like to assure her that there's no damage being inflicted if she's not interested has actually resulted in her feeling way more open and free, because she's not afraid of hurting me and that, right? And it enables her to kind of speak what she's actually feeling or thinking. Thoughts, questions, affirmation? Yeah?
I think that last point, it communicates confidence on your part without you even doing it, because just your response to her is, I'm secure.
I'm fine.
Your answer.
Yes.
And that actually, weirdly enough, like creates an attraction there.
Yes.
That opens the door.
Yes.
Potentially.
Exactly.
Or tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep, great. Okay, last was Hold Her Storm. I think we kind of covered this. This is my daughter Imogen at mid-scream at some point. Yeah, I know, right? So in general, we kind of covered this. In general, for her storm, be calm, unshakable, listen fully, feel actually physically grounded, respond gently when she's upset, right? And when you have a storm, take your own chaos to God or to trusted brothers. First, share what you're feeling, but don't take the monkey off your back and put it onto your wife or any other women in your life. I think we kind of covered that. Great. My challenge is like, hey, maybe pick one of these and do it this week. I will, what now? I don't know how we have time-wise. What is our timing? Cool. We can do clarifying questions. I feel like we've done a lot of those. What I wanted to do is actually break into groups of like 2 and just say, hey, cool, let's do that. Break into groups of 2. And what I did here is kind of summarize, which is question number 1 is, of these 5 images, which of these most accurately describes where your marriage is right now? Of those 5 kind of polls. And then question number 2 is, what's an action you could take immediately to reintroduce polarity into your marriage? And I listed out the 5 that I had there. If there's another one that kind of came up, you can obviously use that as well. And then what I'd love to do is, if we have time, just pray for one another's marriages. And then that'd be it.
10 minutes?
Yeah, 10 minutes. I like pairs of 2 for this, yeah.